Good morning, everyone. It's good to see so many of you. We've been downstairs in Fellowship Hall for so many weeks, so I'm glad to be able to see a lot of you and a lot of family here visiting today for a special occasion. I think the real reason Keith was suspecting is not the foam, it's the electrical stimulators that they put underneath the foam to wake people up when he's preaching that haven't come in yet, so they're waiting on those. Anyway, if you're visiting with us, okay, this is on, is that working back there? Test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, thank you. Okay, if you're visiting with us, I don't know if anybody heard what I said or not. You did? Okay, good. If you're visiting with us, we're very thankful for your presence. I was just thinking, when Josh was up here, and just thinking about everybody, we are so blessed with so many people that love God and want to serve and have been for years. It's the most encouraging thing for me. God's family is God's family anywhere in the world, but when you've come to love and to know people and to see their hearts, it's just so special. And I'm just so grateful to be a part of this work here. Last week, Keith, our fearless pulpit minister, he spoke on God's pattern for elders, their work and their qualifications. And if you weren't here, I'm just going to recap really quickly a few things that he said, actually three things, about church leadership structure, the work of elders and the qualification of elders. And then I want to talk about, very briefly, because we're going to have some other people speak, but I want to talk about what should our responsibility be toward our elders. So first of all, I want to talk about the church leadership structure. Now, he talked about three different models. I just want to talk about what the Bible says, is that the church is led by a plurality of local shepherds, local elders, pastors, bishops. And I think that's pretty neat, God's wisdom, because he knows a plurality, more than one, because what lacks in one person, the other person can make up. Together, two heads are better than one. 4 is even better. 6 is better. So we're really being blessed. But also local shepherds. Some churches have a head person, in another state or another country, or regional superintendents, and they're dictating what a local church should be doing. And it's just God knew what he was doing when he set up the church. We should be governed by local and more than one of men who are qualified, men who are examples in the faith to lead us spiritually. So that's the main thing of the church structure. The other thing about the work of elders, they're called elders, which gives the idea of experience, pastors or shepherds, or bishops and overseers. Now, typically in the churches of Christ, we pretty much use exclusively the term elder, sometimes shepherds. Rarely do we say pastors or bishops or overseers. I think maybe because other churches may abuse those terms. But in the Bible, whenever you see any of these terms, they're all referring to the same work or the same persons that oversee a congregation, the spiritual fathers of a church. I'd like to read again. Jeff read so well, I can't read in that voice. I know when I first came here and I heard Jeff and Clint speak, I thought, it's pretty impressive. I don't think I could ever be an elder here because I don't have a pickup and I don't have that kind of voice. But anyway, so I want to read this here. 1 Peter 5. And explains here Peter's writing. He says, "So I exhort the elders among you as a fellow elder." We know that Peter was married. Jesus healed his mother-in-law. And so he obviously had children. But as a fellow elder and witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed, shepherd, it's used as a verb here, shepherd the flock of God, which is the church, that is among you, exercising oversight, the idea of a bishop or overseer, watching out over, not under compulsion, you're not made to do it, it's not something you have to, but willingly, as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge. This word domineering depends on the translation. You'll see lording over and maybe in more modern terms we might say being a dictator or bullying. No, you're to shepherd the flock, not lording it over, not domineering, not making people obey because I'm in charge here, but being examples to the flock, showing people how we should live. And that doesn't take away your authority any less than a father of a family. He is the authority. He's the head of the household. But he's certainly sensitive to his wife's needs and his children's needs, and he listens, and he makes decisions maybe even against his personal will if it's nothing that's wrong, but just an opinion in order to accommodate his wife or his children or see what works best maybe for others. So he is an example, but he also has authority. It's not taken away, but he doesn't have to pound his fist down and say, I'm in charge here. But he's an example, and people are inspired and they want to follow his lead. And so verse 4, and when the chief shepherd appears, speaking of Jesus, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. So there's a special reward for you all. And I know that you deserve it. So the work of elders is the church is God's family. The elders are the church's spiritual fathers. They take care of us. And now, last of all, when Keith talked about the qualifications of elders, and I'll just briefly go through these. And it's not a checklist, but it's a character sketch. So much so you'll see the qualifications in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and Titus chapter 1. You'll see that they're pretty much the same, but there are some differences in one. Paul mentions some things in one list and others in another. And so the idea is not to just check things off and, okay, this, and this, but it's to give us an idea of this is a person who exemplifies Christian maturity. This is the way we all should be as Christians. And also, it's not a checklist, but a character sketch, because these terms, a lot of them are relative, like being hospitable. How could you check, well, he has 3 people a week in his home, so I guess that's hospitable, but this other person only has 2, so he's not. It's a subjective evaluation of these things. But when we think of these men, we think of these characteristics. 1 Timothy says above reproach, Titus does as well. Husband of one wife, sober-minded, Titus says disciplined. Self-controlled, they both say self-controlled. Titus says respectable, or Timothy says, the letter of Paul to Timothy says respectable. He doesn't mention that in Titus. Obviously, a person that has these qualities will be respectable. In chapter 3, verse 2, Paul writes and says the elder must be hospitable. And then also able to teach. Titus says able to give instruction. And the idea here, sometimes people will kind of think, well, that just means, he has to be able to get up and preach. And no, it doesn't have to be necessarily publicly. Maybe it's not his gift to publicly speak. Now, there are elders in the Bible that worked as elders and preachers, and obviously they had a gift of public speaking. But he's able to teach the truth to a family, to an individual, to the church. But it's not necessarily has to be a great orator. That's not what this is getting at. Also, not a drunkard, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome. To Titus he wrote, not to be arrogant or quick-tempered. They're not exactly the same, but obviously a lot in common there. And verse 3 of chapter 3, he says, not a lover of money. To Titus, he says, not greedy for gain. Also, Paul writes to Timothy and says he must manage his household well. If he doesn't, how can he care for the church of God? And he doesn't say anything about children being Christians, but he's talking about he manages his household well. His children are submissive. They're obedient. It's not total chaos. Now, in Titus, to Titus, he does mention children who are believers, and there's that word pistis in Greek can be translated faithful or obedient or believers. It's actually 3 different ways in different parts of the New Testament is translated. So the idea is that his children have embraced the faith, whether or not all of them necessarily have the age of becoming Christians. We've had elders before that adopted little children after their children have been grown and gone. And so that doesn't disqualify him, but we understand that this man's life is exemplary of a Christian maturity. And then last of all, Paul writes, and he says, not a recent convert. Now to Titus, he doesn't mention that, but obviously it wouldn't be good for a new Christian to be appointed an elder, and Paul says because he might fall in the condemnation of the devil and fall away from the faith. And then last of all, well thought of by others. Okay, so the qualification of elders they're not perfect, but they're an inspiration and an example how we are to be as mature Christians. Hebrews 13:7 says, remember your leaders, those who spoke to you the word of God, consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. So they're to be examples. Now I want to finish here this morning about talking about what is our responsibility to our elders as a church. And there's a lot, but I'll just mention a few, actually 3 of them. First of all, pray for our elders. In Acts chapter 14, and when they had appointed elders for them in every church with prayer and fasting, they committed them to the Lord in whom they had believed. And I'm sure a lot of you, we talked about the possibility of if people were in a position where they could fast sometime this week or from yesterday to today, just as a way to seek God's favor and to ask a special blessing on these men. Because this is a sacred day. This is a special day that we're going to appoint new elders. So we should, first of all, pray for our elders, and then also pray for their wives. A lot of our elders have 2 cars, so the wives don't always have to. I remember in the past they would sit here for hours and hours in the auditorium waiting for the elders to get through with a quick meeting. And but that's just part of it. The elder couldn't be an elder without his support of his wife and her example. And and the Bible talks about qualifications of wives for elders. And so pray for them because it's a sacrifice. It's a big commitment. And so we want to pray for them because no elder is going to be any more effective or stronger than his wife is. Also pray for their children, or in the case of a lot of ours, grandchildren, families in general, because there may be pressures on them that they didn't face before. Oh, you're an elder's son, or you're an elder's grandson, and so they need to be prayed for. They're just people like any of us, and have their own struggles, and they need their encouragement and help as well. And then, last of all, are for their relationships with other elders. I did a master's paper on church relationships within leadership. And it's probably one of the hardest things. You would think it would be the easiest thing, but because we're people and we can have differences of opinions and personality differences and methods of working together. And so we need to pray for our elders' relationships with one another. You know, they work together for hours and hours and years, and a lot of things, a lot of baggage and a lot of different just factors, humanness. And so we need to pray for them. And then last of all, pray for their faith. I've known several cases where church leaders have fallen from the faith because they were so busy taking care of other people's faith that they've neglected their own. And so, like I say, they're not supermen. They're not perfect in any way, but they are men of faith, and we need to pray for them as that. Okay, 1 Peter 5:8 says, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. And if he can cause an elder to fall from the faith, it'll affect not just this congregation, but other churches and generations to come. Secondly, we need to support our elders. Now, that's obvious, but it's not so. It doesn't always happen. We need to play on their team. Put on the same jersey as, we're not adversaries. We're all in this game together, and we're here to help one another. And so any way you can see that you can help them, be on their team. Elders love their work, but it still can be very stressful at times, especially this past year. No eldership has ever dealt with COVID-19 before. And canceling services and bringing them back, and just all the roping off and sanitary, just all the complications involved in all that. And then at the same year, be building a new multi-million-dollar building. Can you imagine the stress and waking up at night and thinking, oh, we should do this or that, or what about this? And then at least we got a good preacher. But it took us a while, and it was stressful until we did, you know? It was stressful until we did, because people were putting pressure on the elders. When are we going to get a new preacher, and this and that? And it's like they're doing their best, and, you know, they're saving the best for last, and here he is, you know, so. But anyway, our elders need this support. Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 28, among all these different persecutions and sufferings that he faced, he said, and apart from other things, there's the daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches. Any church leader, they love the church. They want the best for everybody. Our elders love us. And if there's one person that didn't come to services today, they're concerned about it, or somebody's sick, or somebody's weak in the faith. And so it's a constant stress upon our leaders. So support them, play on their team, and don't criticize or gossip. That's probably one of the biggest explosions, worst catastrophes that can happen in church, because it's so subtle. It's not like, you know, if somebody actually put dynamite out here in the carport and blew it up, we'd all know about it, and it would be in the papers and a big thing. But when people just go around quietly criticizing and gossiping and second-guessing, you know, in any decision, there's probably 3 or 4 or 5 other ways that something could have been decided. And maybe 2 or 3 would be just as good, or maybe even better. But at any rate, if we're playing on the same team, we won't be criticizing, we won't be gossiping, we'll be supporting. You know, no matter what your political views are, I got so tired of hearing people criticizing President Trump. And I thought to myself, you know, if Donald Trump was their son or their father, would they be criticizing him like that? Of course they wouldn't. They would have been all together, because there's love. When somebody in your family you love. So we're God's family. And so support your elders by playing on the same team. Don't criticize or gossip. And certainly volunteer for service. Don't sit around and wait. Well, nobody ever calls on me. Well, elders, sometimes they're out doing stuff themselves because they hate to bother somebody, or they think maybe they're just not sure you'd accept it, or you're not open to that. So go up to them and tell them, hey, I'm available on certain days. I can go with you, or I can do this or that. Just let them know, speak. And of course, here, communicate freely. Tell them what you're available to do. Tell them when you're sick. Tell them when you're going to be out of town. You know, they don't know if you're out of town. They think you're just neglecting maybe the services. Tell them, you know, you're going to have an operation, or someone passed away. You know, they don't have a crystal ball. And so communicate freely and help them do their work. And then last of all, obey your elders. Now that sounds, in the 21st century, that sounds pretty harsh. Obey? I thought they're not supposed to be bullying and lording it over and dominating. No, they're not. But they're still our fathers in the faith. They're still heads of this body of Christ. And Hebrews chapter 13, verse 17 says, obey your leaders and submit to them, for they're keeping watch over your souls as those who will have to give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you. And so, if you're not obedient, submissive to the leadership of this church, it's not only going to make their job harder, but it's not going to bring pleasure and blessings for your life as well. We just need to look, when we do God's will, we'll always be more blessed than anyone we could possibly help out. So we have to obey our elders, and even elders obey elders. You know, if there are 6 elders and 5 of them think that we should paint this building pink, and one thinks it should be purple, the one that thinks it should be purple can't go around saying to everybody, oh, I wanted it purple, but those guys over there, and they're no, they're an eldership, and so they work together, not always necessarily understanding and seeing every opinion. I'm not talking about doctrinal issues, but opinions of things, methodology, and ideas and plans. So they may not always see everything alike. Probably wouldn't. It would really be odd if they did. But they'll need to submit to the decision of the eldership. And so all of us need to learn out of godly fear to obey our elders. As a matter of fact, Paul writes to the church in Ephesus, and he tells the slaves, he says, look, slaves or bondservants, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, with a sincere heart, as you would Christ. Not by the way of eye service as people pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, rendering service with a good will, as to the Lord and not to man. So if servants were to obey their masters from the heart, not just when they were watching them, not just outwardly, but genuinely obeying them, then the same idea is we should obey our elders and we should be submissive to their leadership. We're going to stand and sing the song, Jesus the Loving Shepherd. If you have a need that we can pray for you, or if you're not a Christian and you want to learn more, we invite you to come now as together we stand and sing.
Strength of manhood, come in the morning.